The command post said, "Pull back." But one K9 refused to listen. Under a silent sky, he broke formation, drawn toward a forgotten field no one was meant to enter. The air smelled of rust and burned earth. Each step he took pushed past warnings, past fear, toward something buried too deep to erase. The officers followed, uneasy, their radios crackling with static. Then, a sound beneath the soil, metal against metal, a glint of something marked and hidden. And in that moment, the case everyone thought was closed began to open again. This was not just instinct, it was memory. And what the K9 uncovered that night would change every report, every truth, every name tied to that mission. But what he found next, no one was ready for. You have got to see how this ends. Drop your first guess below, then stay with Titan till the final second. The wind swept across the flat stretch of open land just beyond the city limits. The abandoned field looked empty at first glance. Scattered grass, broken fencing, and a few rusted barrels half sunk in the dirt. Yet the police K9 named Titan refused to leave it. He kept circling the same spot, nose low, ears stiff, ignoring every command that came from the radio and the shouts behind him. No one understood why he broke formation. The command post had just ordered all units to pull back after hours of fruitless searching. Yet Titan pressed forward as if something invisible pulled him in. The leash tightened, the officer holding it stumbled, and still the dog dragged him closer to that barren patch of ground. Here is the full story. But before we jump in, one click can change everything for you here. Hit like, subscribe, and let us see how deep this story really goes. At first, the team thought Titan might be tracking an animal. Coyotes sometimes cross that area, but when the officer noticed Titan's tail stiffen, not wag, something changed. It was not excitement, it was alert tension, the kind that signaled danger, not prey. The field had been part of a sealed investigation months earlier, a drug drop site tied to a case that went cold. That fact alone sent a chill through the officers. They were not supposed to be there. The command post warnings had been clear: stay on the main grid, avoid the northern edge. So why was Titan pulling straight toward it now? A sharp gust carried the scent of burned metal. Titan froze. Then, without warning, he barked once, hard and deep. The sound echoed across the open field. Every head turned toward him. Something beneath the surface caught his focus. His paws clawed at the dirt with sudden force, scattering dry grass and soil. The ground seemed packed, too even, as if someone had deliberately flattened it. The officer called for backup, but Titan was already digging faster, ignoring the leash, the noise, the orders in his earpiece. A faint, metallic glint appeared beneath the loose soil. The officer crouched, brushing it off, a corner of a buried object, smooth and cold. It was not a weapon, not a crate. It looked more like a fragment of machinery, blackened and warped by fire. The command post repeated its order to fall back. Titan growled instead. The growl was low, guttural, and full of something that felt almost human: refusal. As dusk settled, the last light caught on the object's surface. The officer leaned closer and saw a faint mark on it, a serial code that should have been erased months ago. The same code tied to an evidence container that had mysteriously vanished from police storage. Titan stood still now, staring at that mark as if he had known it all along. The wind went silent. The radio static died for a moment. Every instinct in the officer's body screamed that whatever Titan had uncovered was not meant to be found. And yet, it was only the beginning. The call to retreat still buzzed through the officer's headset, but Titan refused to move. The leash hung loose, the dog's muscles locked in that unshakable stance. Something deeper was pulling him. Not fear, not command, but memory. The dirt was colder now, darker beneath the thin grass. The small fragment they found was only the surface. As the officers widened the perimeter, another piece emerged, a strip of burned synthetic fabric, stiff and fused to a melted edge of plastic. It looked like it belonged to a uniform vest, but not one of theirs. They marked the site and began to dig carefully. Each layer unearthed something stranger. A torn glove, a badge clip with no badge attached, and then buried deeper, a folded sheet of metal, the kind used in covert equipment cases. Titan sat beside it, watching every motion with focused, steady eyes. For a moment it seemed like routine evidence recovery, until one of the officers noticed something odd. The melted metal had traces of paint, blue and white, the same pattern used for command post field units. That meant whatever this was, it came from their own operation. The driver had been presumed dead after the wreckage was found burned beyond recognition. No one had ever located the dog that had been assigned to that vehicle. Was Titan reacting to that memory, or was it something else entirely? The air grew heavier. The radio static turned to faint interference, voices overlapping, dispatch codes from earlier transmissions. Titan lifted his nose and barked again, short and urgent. He began circling a few feet from the dig site, sniffing at the ground like he was tracing a scent only he could sense. Then his paw stopped on something soft beneath the soil. The officer knelt, brushed the dirt aside, and froze. There, half buried, was a torn corner of a K9 harness. Faded, shredded, but still carrying an embroidered name patch. The letters were faint but legible enough to make every officer's throat tighten. The name stitched on that harness was Rex. Titan's tail went still, his body lowered slightly, not in aggression but in recognition. Rex had been his partner, another K9 from the same training unit who had disappeared during that same field operation. Everyone believed Rex had perished in that explosion months ago. Yet here, in this abandoned field, fragments of his gear were lying buried. Questions hit harder than the cold wind. Why would parts of Rex's gear end up in the area that the command post had forbidden? And why did Titan seem to know exactly where to find them? The senior officer radioed the command post for authorization to continue the dig, but the reply came back clipped and tense. Cease activity. Secure perimeter only. No reason given. That silence said more than any explanation could. Titan stood over the ground again and let out a low, mournful sound. Not a bark, not a growl, but a quiet whine that carried across the empty field. It felt less like discovery and more like remembrance. The officers exchanged glances. One of them muttered under his breath that maybe the field was never cleared right. Maybe something or someone was left behind. But as Titan's paw scraped the earth again, a hollow metallic echo answered from below. It was deeper this time, like the sound of a sealed container striking a rock. Every officer froze. Whatever was under there was not wreckage, it was something hidden intentionally. Titan looked back once, his eyes reflecting the fading light, steady, determined, unblinking, and then he started digging again. The night settled over the field like a heavy curtain. Portable lights flickered on, washing the ground in pale white. The officers formed a perimeter as Titan continued clawing at the dirt. The hollow sound grew clearer, metal against metal, a dull thud beneath the soil that pulsed with every strike of his paw. The team moved in carefully. They brushed away the last layer of earth and uncovered a small storage container, about the size of a laptop case, sealed tight with scorched latches. It looked military, not police issue. The serial numbers were scraped off, except for one partial marking on the edge, OPS 47. That code had appeared once before, in the report of the same operation where Rex vanished. The commanding officer hesitated. Protocol demanded they wait for forensic clearance, but something about the air, the stillness, Titan's tense posture made waiting feel wrong. The case was pried open slowly. A rush of stale air escaped. Inside were torn documents, blackened photos, and a single memory drive wrapped in melted plastic. Titan did not move, his stare fixed not on the case, but on something lying beside it, a piece of a tactical vest with a number stitched near the shoulder strap. The number was 21, the ID of Rex's handler, Officer Miles. Miles had vanished with his K9 the night of the explosion. His vehicle was the one burned beyond recognition, but the report said remains were found, confirmed as human. So how could this vest be intact, buried miles away from the wreck? The discovery broke the silence of the command post radio. Static burst, then a voice cut in, distorted, panicked, then abruptly silenced. The signal died again. The team exchanged wary looks. Was someone trying to block the transmission? The air smelled of rust and oil. Titan's nose pressed against the drive, his breathing quick and short. He pawed at the ground again, this time a few inches to the side, until the tip of his claw struck something else, a shallow, cracked surface that felt like glass. The officer crouched, brushed it clean, and uncovered the shattered lens of a dash camera, the same model used in K9 patrol vans. That was when the realization sank in. The field had not been a crash site. It had been a dump site. Evidence, memory, and truth had been buried together to erase something. The senior officer connected the drive to his field tablet, ignoring the risk. The file structure opened slowly. Only one video survived. Its timestamp matched the night Rex and Miles vanished. The footage was shaky, dark. Headlights illuminated a narrow trail, the same dirt track they were standing on now. Then faintly, the sound of barking filled the background. A second later, a voice, faint through static, gave an order from a distance. It was not Miles's voice. It came from the command post frequency. The final frame froze on an image of a field ahead, empty, unmarked, except for two distant figures walking toward the horizon. One was human, the other was a dog. Then the video cut to black. Titan's ears twitched, his breathing slowed. He turned toward the far edge of the field, where the darkness deepened past the lights. Without warning, he started walking that way, slow, purposeful, as if following a trail the others could not see. The officer called after him, but Titan did not turn back. He stopped near the old boundary fence, the one that marked where the original search had ended 6 months ago, and started pawing again. The sound that came up this time was different, not metal, not soil. A hollow wooden echo, faint but unmistakable. Every light swung toward him. Titan's head lifted. His tail stiffened, his nose pressed to the earth one last time. Whatever was under that wooden layer was what the case had tried to hide, and as the officers gathered their tools, one thought pulsed through every mind. If this connected to the command post itself, someone had wanted it buried for a reason. The first strike of the shovel splintered through the wood. A dull crack echoed under the night lights. Titan stood beside the hole, steady and silent now, eyes fixed on the dark gap opening below. Each movement of soil released the smell of damp rot mixed with metal and oil, not decay, but something stored and forgotten. They lifted the final board aside. What lay beneath froze the air. It was a sealed evidence crate, marked with the same operation code OPS 47, and an identification tag from the original command post. It had been logged as destroyed months ago. Inside were 3 items: a burnt radio headset, a half-melted key card, and a field notebook, miraculously preserved inside a plastic pouch. The notebook belonged to Officer Miles. The handwriting inside was cramped, hurried, almost frantic. The last few pages described a mission change, orders that contradicted the official report. Miles had written that the command post redirected them toward a different drop zone, one that had not been authorized. He wrote that he and Rex followed the coordinates anyway, trusting the order. What they found instead was a secondary team already there, off record, moving containers that were never entered into evidence. His final entry stopped mid-sentence. The field went silent again. Titan lowered his head to the notebook, breathing over the pages as if he recognized the scent. The officer holding it swallowed hard. The truth was beginning to form. Miles had uncovered internal corruption, and someone in command buried it with him. The fragments they found earlier, the vest, the melted metal, the dash cam, were not remnants of a crash. They were discarded pieces from a cover-up. The command post frequency suddenly came alive, sharp and urgent. All units cease operation. Site classified. The voice was firm but cold, detached. Titan's ears twitched. The officer cut the transmission. He looked at his team, all silent, waiting, and made a decision that would change everything. He logged the discovery independently, off the command channel, marking Titan as the lead. Forensics confirmed what the notebook implied. The container buried beside Rex's harness carried trace residues of unregistered weapons and counterfeit evidence tags. The serial code found on the first metal fragment matched entries that had been quietly erased from the police inventory. The case that once ended in silence now opened into a full internal inquiry. Weeks later, Titan stood once more in front of the same field, now cleared, fenced, and marked as an investigation site. The air was still, the ground sealed, the night quiet. But this time he was not searching, he was being honored. The department gathered under the floodlights. The chief read the commendation aloud, voice steady but heavy with meaning. Titan was awarded the Medal of Valor, recognition for uncovering evidence that exposed what the system had tried to hide. The officer knelt beside him, resting a hand on his collar. The dog's eyes stayed on the horizon, the same direction where the wooden crate had been found. For a moment it seemed like he was still listening, still guarding what his fallen partner could not finish. The truth about OPS-47 became the turning point that reshaped the department's internal protocols. Miles and Rex's names were restored on the memorial wall, their records cleared of the false reports that once buried them. Titan visited that wall often, sitting beneath the engraved names without a sound. The officers who passed by said it felt like he was keeping watch, not just for his partner, but for every truth that had been hidden too long. The story of the field closed with no headlines, no broadcast, just quiet closure written in the loyalty of a dog who refused to obey when obedience meant forgetting. Titan's disobedience did not break command, it restored it. Some stories end in silence, but this one will echo for a long time. What Shadow uncovered tonight was more than just a secret. It was a reminder of how far loyalty can go when no one else is watching. Stay close. The next story digs even deeper, and trust me, you'll want to be here when it breaks.